הבהרה, התוכן המשודר מבוסס על עדויות אישיות של מרואיינים אשר נאמרו על דעתם בלבד. אין לראות בתוכן משום המלצה כלשהי לרבות המלצה רפואית ואו נפשית, ואין לראות בו משום עידוד לביצוע פעולות כלשהן.
ישראל, החיים שאחרי החיים.
שלום וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט המצולם של ישראל. היום יש לנו אורחת מיוחדת מאוד, הילה, תספרי לנו עליה קצת.
היום אנחנו נרגשים לארח כאן איתנו את רנו אורורה, הרבה אור בשם אחד. רנו היא אומנית, יוצרת, שחקנית, שחוותה ב-2017 חוויית סף מוות בעת שהיא נפגעה מאוטובוס. ואנחנו כאן שמחים לארח אותך, רנו, ולשמוע את הסיפור שלך. Hello,
Renu. Hi.
Hello, Hila. Hello, Henry.
How are you?
Thank you for having me on. I'm very well, thank you. How are you both?
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. So my story, I mean, I don't know how far back you'd like me to go because, I mean, we can get to that point later on, but the crux of the story obviously starts on the 29th of March, 2017. I was coming home. I work as an actor, singer, writer. I work in the arts. I've been working in the arts for sort of, before the accident, the best part of 16 years, so now for about sort of 19, 20 years. And I was coming home from an acting job, and it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. And I had texted a close friend of mine who used to live with me. So she used to be my housemate. And she'd moved out to get married and live with her husband. But because she worked nearby, she still lived close by to me. So I texted her and I said, let's make a curry tonight. Obviously, I'm Indian and she used to love my curries when we were living together. So she went, yeah, great, that'll be great. And I got home and I was absolutely exhausted because I wasn't well for the months prior to the accident. And I said, I'm just feeling really ropey and just not well. And she said, don't worry, I can help you chop all the ingredients. We can still have our evening. I said, okay, but just to let you know, my phone's got no battery. So I'll see you back at the flat in sort of 20 minutes whilst I go and buy my ingredients in the shop, which is sort of a few doors down from us. So fine. So I texted her saying, fine, left the phone on the table, went out, walked out to the shop, which is a few doors away down from us, and put my ingredients in the basket. And as I was going to pay, I realized that the queue was extending almost outside the shop on this day. And I thought, why? It's the middle of, it's the end of March. There's no Jewish festival. We live in a Jewish area. There's no Indian festival. It's not Christmas. Why is the queue extending outside the shop on this day at the end of March? And I thought my friend's going to potentially be at my door, buzzing, potentially be worried because she knew that I've not been well. And what do I do? So I got my basket and I walked up to the cashiers and I said, who knew me well because I've been living in this area for such a long time. And I said, can I just leave my basket here on the counter whilst I go and wave to my friend, who they also knew well too? They were like, yeah, that's totally fine. So I left the basket on the counter and just walked out of the shop, hoping that I would be able to see her just walking down the road towards me. So I looked up the road and there was a bus stop obscuring my view, but it was 6-ish in the evening, so I didn't think anything of it. So I looked through the bus stop to get a view into the kind of up the pavement to see if I could see her walking down the road. And I thought, that's odd, I can't see her. So I walked towards the edge of the pavement a bit more to get a better view into the pavement to see if I could see her. Still couldn't see her. And we live on the A1, which is a very busy road in the middle of North London. And there's a bus lane adjacent to the road. And you can often hear buses because obviously they're noisy. But I didn't hear a bus coming in. So clearly a bus had been coming into the bus stop, which I hadn't seen. So I walked towards the edge of the pavement a bit more and just put my toes over the edge, put my arm in the air in the hope that she'd be able to see me if she was, walking down the road. And I would signal that I was in the shop next door, and that would be that. And as I put my toes over the edge, a bus was obviously coming in, which I hadn't heard. I was looking in the opposite direction. The bus was coming in this direction. The bus caught the edge of my boot and started to pull and drag my lower leg and foot and boot underneath the wheel of the bus. And I remember watching my leg get pulled under the wheel of the bus. And I remember thinking to myself, how much of me and how much of my leg is this bus going to take? I think I'm a goner, because I could see myself getting pulled underneath, and I thought, where is it going to stop? How far is it going to take me? Am I going to be completely crushed under the wheel of this bus? So obviously the bus did stop a few moments later, after I was kind of dragged for a few moments. He did obviously realise. And what had happened was, it's amazing what we remember, as you, Hila, will know, during times of huge trauma. Like some of the details will stay in our minds forever, won't they? So I remember seeing a man in a white car actually driving in parallel to the bus. And he'd seen what happened, he'd seen the accident, and he'd then come to a complete stop in front of the bus very quickly. So the driver swung his door open, leapt out of the car, seen me under the bus, seen the bus driver, and just screamed, "Go back, you've got someone underneath you." And at that point, I was going into shock, because I still thought I was standing up. So I still felt my feet firmly on the ground, my arm in the air, my wallet and my keys in one hand, and the arm in the air in the other, the arm in the other. And I just thought to myself, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And I couldn't quite compute what had happened, because I still felt like I was standing up. But something in my brain said, just say what he said. Say what he said. So I then screamed, "Go back, you've got someone underneath you," still not realizing that somebody was me.
Wow.
So he then screamed it another, I think it took both of us to scream the same thing maybe twice. So 4 screams in total for the bus driver to realize and then to reverse off me. At which point I was obviously completely in shock. But it's really interesting, because at the moment of impact, I then floated up. So I perceived there were potentially 3 realities happening in that moment. The one reality was my body was underneath the wheel of the bus. The second reality was that I was standing up. And the third reality was that I had ejected my body, was floating up. And I remember floating up very fast, and I could see the top of this red bus. And I remember thinking and feeling, wow, this is just amazing. I feel so weightless and so alive, so alive and just so wonderful. I felt like I'd come home, And so I was floating up, and the higher I floated, the more the physical world just kind of fell away. And I remember my wingspan being like, in London we have boroughs, as you both may know, and I felt like my wingspan was the whole of my borough and back and beyond. It was just, phenomenal. I remember thinking, oh wow, I feel so wide and just so vast. And I felt like I was everyone and everything, and there was no separation between me and everybody, and I just felt like this beautiful being essence. And I remember feeling and seeing these shards of light just kind of beaming into my heart from every single direction, like a star, just bathing my heart, my spirit, my soul with the most love-filled, beautiful light. And I remember feeling like I was being bathed and polished and purified. And at that moment then, I remember my heart felt like it was taken out of my chest, given a wonderful polish to the point where I felt like it was sparkling clean, filled up with like this eternal love that will never go, and then put back in again. And I remember feeling just purified and clean and cleansed and sparkling and polished. And then I remember hearing a voice that came from the right-hand side of me, and my perception was that it was a male voice, because it was a very deep, booming voice that just seemed to resonate through the whole of my being. Like, you'll probably know this too, Hila, from your experience. When you hear a voice in NDE, it's unbelievably booming, isn't it? I just felt like the sound itself reverberated inside every part of me. It was just like the sound felt like it was me, just like it came through me, but it wasn't. It was coming from the right of me, and the voice said, "Love is all there is." Wow. I remember going, this is beautiful. And I remember seeing words as well in black. Love is all there is. And I remember seeing it, and it was black, but it was beautiful. Like, it's just beautiful, dense, black and beautiful. And then that faded away. And then I heard another message, and then I started to see the words again. And the message was, give love. And I saw the words on my right, give love, and then they faded. And then I saw because love is all there is. And then I saw that. And it was just beautiful. You know, as you know, it's very difficult to kind of put words on how essential and how beautiful and how eternal an experience like this is, because, you know, as we all know here, that an NDE is not a one-time event, it's a lifetime event. So it's not something that one can ever let go of or forget, or will ever lose its sense of potency or power, because every time we speak about it, it's as potent as if it was happening, as if it's happening now. So I remember being up in that space and just feeling so warm and so blessed and so happy. And I remember also feeling like I was love. You know, I just thought, oh my goodness, you know, and I felt there's no separation between me and other people. And it's almost like I could hear their thoughts and feel their feelings, and I was them and they were me. And I remember when the voice happened, I remember thinking, it's coming through me. So clearly it's some kind of, it's a godlike presence being. But I also felt like I was it, and it was me. So there was no difference between me and the source of all creation in those moments. And then I think in pictures, so I remember seeing a beautiful room that looked very much like a scene from Beauty and the Beast, the film Beauty and the Beast. There's a beautiful scene in the film, and I can't go too much into it because I'm saving it for my podcast, The Burgundy Book, but I can say that it looked very much like a scene from the film where the Beast gives Belle his library. So I remember seeing this beautiful room that was lined with books. So there were books on the periphery, so on the edges of the room. There were beautiful, like, you know, old-fashioned, large, hardback, jewel-coloured books with, like, gold gilt detail along the spines. You know those books where you open and you kind of have to go because they're so dusty and so beautiful. They were like that, and I remember thinking, these are just absolutely stunning books. One of the things, actually, that I didn't mention was that during the NDE, the only other thing in terms of words or numbers that I actually saw was the number 25, and my perception was that my soul in that moment grew 25 lifetimes. I just knew it. Like, it wasn't a sense of, I wonder what that could mean. I just knew it, and I saw it, and I thought, wow. That's one of the things that we NDEs come back with, a sense of the filters kind of, they go, don't they? And I don't know whether you felt this, Hila, but when I came back, I mean, there's so much to say, but like one of the things I've felt like that has kind of transformed and come back with me is that I feel like my whole being has reset itself. Like doing a system reset in a computer, you know? So many of my old limiting beliefs have either completely broken or loosened, you know? And it's just like, it's like I was reset and I was starting to build a sense of being from scratch, from being a baby.
How this experience change who you are, your perceptions that you had before your experience?
Oh, so much. I feel like a completely different being. I mean, firstly, it's given me insight. I feel so much more connected to everybody's divinity because I'm connected to my own. So because I feel so connected to my sense of love, which I feel like it lives here in my heart, this godly sense of essential love, I feel connected to other people's hearts and other people's God within them as well. And before the accident, I was living life through a filter, like we all do. And that filter for me held various, I mean, we all have conditioning, don't we, from life growing up, and it's just part of life. And I was living life with a lot of limiting beliefs and attitudes that weren't serving me. And so I was keeping myself, relatively small, and I was unwell, and I was prioritizing the wrong thing, and I had glandular fever many times. It's a virus that one gets, and it can be quite serious. And every time I've had it, it's lasted about between 6 months and a year. And it's been a really horrible thing to have happened. And I had it just before the accident, and I was in the year before the accident, I was just pushing myself and just working myself to the bone, and working crazily to because I felt like I had to. I didn't prioritize myself. I didn't love myself. I didn't know myself to love myself. And so even though I did some wonderful things in my life and my career, I was massively disconnected. I was so disconnected. So I was just like living from my head with these kind of anxious patterns running and limiting beliefs. And it was just a mess. And actually, on the 28th of March 2017, the night before the accident, I was sitting in a restaurant with a friend of mine. And my friend had known what I'd been through that year and how much I'd been struggling to push myself to work and not prioritize myself. And I was just sitting opposite him and just kind of crying. And I said, I'm so exhausted. And he said, yeah, I know. You've worked through being so very unwell. I mean, there were times where I'd text my friend and I was at work and I'd say, I think I'm going to pass out. I've gone green. I was that sick. And he'd said, you've worked your way through this. You just need a rest. Is there any chance you can take a few weeks or a few months off? And I just went, yeah, I think I probably could, knowing full well that I probably wouldn't, And he said, why don't you go into work tomorrow and just tell your team that you just need a bit of time out to rest and relax. And I said, yeah, that's a really sensible idea. And I had kind of made the decision because, my friend was right. I was literally working myself into the ground. And actually, if the accident hadn't happened, I'd probably be dead because I wasn't healthy. I wasn't giving myself any sense of nourishment or health. So I did go to work the following day and I did say to my team, I just need a bit of time out. And then, of course, that night, the accident happened. And actually, prior to the accident, I remember night after night just kind of almost crying myself to sleep and wishing and just praying to God and to the universe and just saying, I need to break, because I felt like I put all these, like, both defenses or patterns, and I built up a sense of identity that just wasn't real. Like so many layers I put up.
It's about remembering. In a minute, you just remember, and suddenly all the personality, everything that you wear or hold, it's not who you are.
It's an ego identity. It's not real. It's a perception through which we live our life that isn't true. In the first few months after coming back, I remember thinking to myself, and actually I wrote this down, I remember writing, I know nothing and I know everything at the same time.
Yes.
It was phenomenal. And exactly that time, there is no time in that space, is there? I mean, there's no past and there's no future. There's just this isness, this presence. And in that time, it feels so long and vast, doesn't it? Even though in real time, it's probably only sort of a few minutes or a few seconds even. But like it feels so long, and we travel so far and so fast that it feels like so much happens in that space that transcends a sense of, time, how we perceive time in the physical world. Like you say, the chasm between where I was and who I am internally feels massively different. I feel so connected to myself and my heart, and the sense of self-love that I have is so precious that I'd never accessed before. I mean, even things like I feel there's an ease about which I go through my life. Again, I never felt that before. I never had a sense of peace. I mean, all these things, it's just completely shifted my internal landscape. And then that obviously shifts how I live my life and how I go about life and my interactions with people. Because of this no separation, because we feel that there's a sense of, we feel love, don't we? That we're all love. So I think once you feel your own love, then it's much easier to feel other people's, because we're all the same, we're all love.
When we introduced you, we said you were an artist. Do you feel it changed you as an artist?
Yes, very much. I feel like it's made me a deeper artist. It's made me a more nuanced, detailed artist. It's made me a gentler artist. So it's a really interesting thing of going, oh, that's interesting. I've now become my own story. So now my job is to tell my own story with the skills that I already have. So I actually feel very blessed to be an artist, like, you know, to have the skills to make work around, you know, the accident, the trauma, the experience, the NDE, especially the aftermath, the after effects of it. Because I think if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to speak about it now, sort of fairly early,
Yeah.
fairly soon after the experience. I think it would have taken me, you know, 10, 15, you know, maybe longer years to be able to speak about it. But being an artist means that, has always meant for me anyway, that I'm already very open. So I speak about stuff on social media to my friends so frequently, and I've posted on social media very frequently about the accident, about the experience, about the specifics of it, about the NDE, a lot anyway. So it never felt like a shift or a big kind of shift to kind of, you know, go, I'm going to make work around it. It just felt like a very natural progression, you know, to make work inspired by the experience. So yeah, it has changed me. I do feel like it's changed me. It's given me so much purpose and fulfillment, and it's helped me to create a new life for myself, which I couldn't feel more grateful for.
It's healing too now, isn't it? Like dealing with the artistic world, doing creative work. I think it's very healing and helps in the integration process.
Okay. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that the world has never been more ready for our stories and our words and our experiences. And I think the land has never felt, to me anyway, the land has never felt more fertile. You know, it's almost like I can feel the plates in the earth kind of moving, in readiness for us, you know, for these stories, for these experiences, for everything that we have to offer and to share, you know, because I find that the hunger for the human story is always highest during times of crisis or times of massive change. And we're in that space as a world now, obviously. And I think the other thing is that in terms of the art, is that art is very spiritual, isn't it? I mean, to me, there's no difference between art and spirituality. Spirituality and art are so interconnected. And the muse is spiritual. The inspiration is spiritual. So I think also the difference for me as an artist is that, obviously, having written, you know, songs and shows and things my whole life, I was always aware of having inspiration come through me, because that's where the best work is. But I was also very aware of, because of those anxious patterns and that conditioning that was so strong that I lived through so many times in my life where I was creating, I was shutting down that sense of inspiration or the muse, because that sort of false self, as you mentioned, Tina, was so strong. And so my negative beliefs that I perceived them to be negative because they weren't serving me. I can see that in hindsight now, looking back. And my negative beliefs were to always expect the worst. Like I was I've always been a positive person, but I was always expecting, you know, the worst within that, which is a strange thing to say, but I did. I didn't expect things to go brilliantly and to expect the best. So because of that, I was always kind of running these patterns of, it's not going to go well, it's not going to go well, I'm not good enough, I'm never good enough. So I was living through these patterns, and that creates a sense of lack and emptiness all the time. And then that drove me to do more and try to be more and just try. And then, of course, that hole just gets bigger and bigger, and it's never enough. And I was never enough.
You talked about self-love, that you didn't love yourself before, but if you want to love yourself, you need to know yourself. That's what you said. So what is knowing ourselves?
Oh, what a beautiful question.
Where is the start point?
To me, knowing myself comes from being in my body. And that's also a massive shift. I was in my head before. I wasn't in my body, like ever, at all. Wow. You know, and I could feel it. I just wasn't connected. I felt like I was just here up. There was no sense of anything underneath me. So I had no sense of who I was. It was just all here. And this is where the false self is, and the constructs of a perception of life, which the layers that I mentioned earlier, which just wasn't true. It wasn't a true identity. It was a perceived identity through which I filtered myself in the world.
Wow.
And so to me, knowing myself has come from really fully being in my body. And my perception is that when we're fully in our body, we're fully present anyway. Because if we're fully in our body, we're not in our minds. So we can't be running patterns. We kind of can't. You mentioned about how the experiences changed me as an artist. And one of the biggest things is that I feel like I have a responsibility. I don't know whether as you were talking, I remembered this point. I don't know whether you feel this. I feel like I have a responsibility to the experience and to the NDE and to what I felt and saw during that time, during those moments, to share it with the world. So I feel like in terms of purpose is so very different now. So everything I do goes through that filter, and that's a much nicer filter than the filters I was living through before the accident, I tell you. Yeah. So whether the work is directly about the NDE or indirectly, I'll put it in there somewhere. Nice. So I made some pieces around the pandemic and lockdown at the beginning of the pandemic in March for BBC Radio, BBC Sounds, because of the fact that for me, I feel like my lockdown started in 2017. So lockdown for me didn't feel that different because my mobility is different anyway as a result of the accident. So not going out didn't feel, my new normal had already started, through a screen anyway. So it never felt different. So when I made those three pieces, I obviously made them about my experience to reflect the world's experience, but I obviously subliminally, as you'll know, Henry and Tila, put the NDE in there just subliminally without kind of making it overt or explicit, so that people can get a sense of it just subliminally through the work, if that makes sense.
You have mentioned that your out-of-body experience was just to be. You said in one of your videos that while you were outside of your body, you felt a full presence. And it's a different presence from this world, like when you say like this presence is being in this body. But can you explain what is this full presence that you felt outside the body?
Yeah. So the experience when I was outside of my body, that presence felt like an all-knowing, all-loving, all-encompassing being. It just felt everything. So there wasn't mind, but I still knew everything, if that made sense. Everything from the past, everything from the future, there was just this being. And because I wasn't in physical form either, it felt very vast and very full and very love-filled. So, and it's interesting because coming back, I felt like I had to squeeze all of that back into this, small, limited human body. And I don't know whether you experience this, Hila, but it's a very difficult transition. I mean, I came back, and I know a lot of NDEers will say this, that I wanted to be back there. So actually coming back into my body didn't happen straight away. It took a couple of years to get to that point. Because for a while, I remember thinking, I just want to be back there because that's the most loving space I've ever felt. I didn't want to die. I didn't have a death wish, but I did feel like, why did I come back? That was a beautiful space. Even though I knew I had a purpose, and that's the reason why I did come back. There was a part of me that felt like it was still there, and there is a part of me that is, part of my soul is still there. But the part of me that's still there now, I feel like I can use it, as opposed to wishing I was back in that space.
Did you feel that you kept your own personality when you were outside the body?
Yes and no. So no, in the sense that because there's no mind, there was no personality. But yes, in the sense I felt like there was an imprint of me in that space, and the imprint kept the essence of my personality. The essence being, I didn't feel like I was, part of me knew I was, Renu me, but there was no sense of like, I have this quality and that trait and that trait. It was none of that. It was just simply, I know the imprint of this person who's kind of risen up, if that makes sense. And I also knew that I, as Renu, wanted to be, even before the accident, as loving as I could be, but of course hadn't quite managed to, because what was driving me was a sense of lack. So there was a sense of that, definitely, but there wasn't a kind of full-blown personality, not at all, not at all. Because there was no sense of mind, so I wasn't thinking. There was just a sense of knowing. It's almost like an imprint of something, like a skin. So if I can imagine myself as, we can imagine ourselves as people, and if you can imagine the soul coming out of the body and you can see this kind of translucent imprint, it felt like a very rough imprint of me. So I can't really kind of describe which elements of me, but it just felt like a rough, hazy, like when you're tracing something on paper and you get like a rough imprint of the actual beautiful drawing. It felt like a rough imprint. But what was obviously heightened was this sense of love that obviously I came back with. I don't know whether that answers your question. I mean, I suppose for me, what was there personality-wise was a sense of observation. So when I was in that space, when I was observing these messages that I perceived were from God, and I felt myself to be elements of God myself, I felt like the observation, and I remember, even though we have no mind in that space, that I could almost feel myself, kind of going, oh, that's interesting. And during the NDE, of course, which I've kind of left for the podcast, but during that space as well, I remember going, oh, that's interesting, when I had my life review. So the personality was very slightly there, in the sense it was giving me a sense of reaction to the reflection. But the reaction was very much an observation, as opposed to framing it as a judgment in terms of good or bad. It wasn't, it just was. So that's as far as the personality for me went. Me kind of looking at things and experiencing my life review as it happened, experiencing God and going, oh, that's interesting, that's beautiful. That just is.
Can you elaborate on the fact that you felt your heart has been taken out, been cleaned? What is the importance of purifying our heart and cleaning our heart? How can we help people do that?
So one of the things I've learned as I've come back into my body, over recent years, is that I'm okay and perfect as I am. And that's, to me, one of the biggest lessons, is coming back into my heart and going, oh my gosh, there's nothing to do or strive for or attain. And so much of, various doctrines and religious doctrines and spirituality is about doing, but actually we're human beings. And for me, coming back into my body and being and feeling my heart, yes, okay, I've had an NDE, and my experience, obviously, as you both know, and like yours, Hila, is obviously massive and huge and has changed me immeasurably. However, coming back into my heart, I now realize I'm perfect as I am. There's nothing to change or improve. So to me, that's what I would say for people, is that there's nothing to change or improve. Once we're back into our body, we realize, for me anyway, I realize that I'm absolutely perfect as I am. And that's where that perfection is the love, and that perfection is the God. And that's, to me, how I one of the ways that I access my own divinity and connect to all life around me. The whole thing of feeling not perfect before the accident, I was also judging myself, and I was also brought up, because so many religions are God-fearing. So I was brought up in a religious framework, which was beautiful as a Hindu, but the subtext was that if you do something, potentially wrong, you'll be punished. So I always had this sense that I was literally constantly being punished for something I'd done previously, or maybe something mundane, or something I'd said that came out wrong, or whatever it might be. So my perception was that I was always being punished. And I had an epiphany, actually, earlier this year, where I was saying a prayer, and I still pray to the Hindu gods, just because that's the framework I've grown up with and it makes sense to me. And I was just praying, and I remember, and I said to God, you're not judging me, are you? I'm judging me. I remember having this light bulb turn on and going, this is, I have been the source of all of my judgments, pain. It's not God, it's me. For me, when I was giving before the accident, I was giving from a place of feeling empty. And I can only obviously see that in hindsight, looking back. I didn't know it then. But I can see it now with the comparison of giving from this love-filled place, from the NDE, which of course won't get depleted because it was filled up with an essential being godlike love. But that said, I still have to look after myself. It doesn't mean that I can abuse my body and that love will still be there, because I'm the vessel through which this love comes. So unless I'm nurturing myself, looking after myself, protecting the space, yes, allowing myself to be as vulnerable, as open, and within that then there's strength, and as authentic as I can be, I won't be able to give authentically from my heart and give from that space. So I feel like I need to keep myself as clear as I possibly can as a vessel so that the love can come through me in whatever interaction I have.
So conclusion, if you want to start cleaning your heart, clean your perceptions, clean what you bring in to this temple.
And I think once we realize that we're perfect as we are, I think what you were saying about to clean what you bring into this temple, I think that's beautiful. And I think once we get to that knowing that we're perfect as we are, then we naturally, as you say, begin to filter what we bring into the temple, just because we're more in our body and we're more in our sense of, we're more here anyway. So I think then we naturally start to kind of filter and be more mindful of our perceptions and how perceptions affect our reality and how they affect other people and all of it. One of the things that we come back with is a heightened sense of compassion and a heightened sense of connection to all life. And I think for me, coming back into the body, there is a natural sense of compassion there anyway, if that makes sense. So a byproduct of an NDE coming back into the body is compassion, is empathy, is love.
Yes.
You know, and that then for me means that the way I talk to myself obviously has changed. So I won't be kind of hammering myself with a hammer anymore, beating myself up, because that compassion extends to me too.
Why do you think, Renu, why we don't experience this unity that we experienced outside the body? If it's all one.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Do you experience moments of that in this realm?
A glimpse of that.
Yeah, and I think that's
not the same. It's very, it's with boundaries. It's
there's a window into it. It's not the whole. Yeah, I think that's true. I think we've all, coming back into this body, we all know what it's like to experience a glimpse of it, like a beautiful sunset, sunrise, a beautiful piece of music, something that transports us beyond, beyond realms. We all know what that feels like. But as you say, it's like a window in, it's a glimpse as opposed to the whole thing. And I think for me, that's where the joy is of being in this realm, in this physical realm, in a physical body, is experiencing glimpses of it and kind of going, but those pieces are pieces of the bigger picture. So I don't think we can experience the whole thing every day, because we are living in this physical realm. We do have responsibilities. We do have a physical life to lead. But I think it's taking note of those moments, like a sunset, like a beautiful piece of music, anything that takes us, that makes time stand still, which is, of course, what NDEs feel, that time stands still. There's no. And I think, as you say, there's a boundary, because obviously we're living in this physical body, and the physical body has a skin. And that's, my sense is that's part of the joy of living in this physical body, of experiencing the physical realm, so that when we can go to that next realm, we can take our lessons with us and evolve our soul, so that the next time we come back, if we decide to come back, if that's your belief, we can learn different lessons.
That's beautiful. Thank you. You said that you merged with everything. You felt one with everything. But on the other hand, you had the feeling of yourself. So how could it be that you are merging with everything, you're all one with everything, but still you are Renu?
Yeah, I mean, with an NDE, there's so many realities taking place, aren't there? I mean, I was one. There was still a sense of an imprint, as you know, of me, and I felt like I was still standing up, and there's also a reality that I was underneath the weight of the bus. So I feel like in that space, logic doesn't come into it. So many things are happening at the same time, as you know. So many realities are happening. We're seeing so many things, and yet, we might say things that kind of are difficult to understand on this plane. It's like multitasking, but you can, as you know, float and see all sorts of things all in the same moment and be in different realities in one moment.
Maybe it's like your example with the vessel. You're one vessel in the whole body, but there is one body. The vessel is a vessel, but is part of a system who works together and feed each other.
So it's one organism, and you are like a cell in it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's a universal breath, and we're plugging into the universal.
That's the same words you used, a universal breath.
Yes.
Like
really?
It's breathing. Yeah, she used it as well.
Oh, wow.
And you're a beautiful vessel, I have to say.
Thank you very much. So are you. So are you. Very much. And I think you're right. There's a sense of, that's exactly right. There was a sense of being plugged into everyone and everything. And yet within that, I felt like I had that everyone and everything within me. So I knew that I was the world and the world was me. And I was God and God was me at the same time.
It's beautiful. Renu, what can we wish you?
What can you wish me? I've never been asked that before. That's just, your hearts are so beautiful and open. Thank you. What can you wish me? I don't know. Is there a blessing that we can do together from our hearts to connect the three of us?
That we are all will be one heart with the same language in our heart. So there will be nothing that will be between us.
Well, that's interesting, because I actually say in my podcast series that the language of the heart is the only language I now speak and understand. So you've said exactly what I've been myself feeling and pondering. Yeah.
That's the meaning language of the heart, that we all feel the same. We all talk the same inside. It doesn't matter the letters, the language.
So, Renu, thank you so much for being with us, and hope to speak to you soon. תודה לכם, צופים יקרים שהייתם איתנו. נתראה בפודקאסט הבא. ביי.